Let me put it to you this way. I was visiting with my aunt, who's the inspiration for the story, and I was going through all of this historical material in her basement, albums, newspaper clippings, all of that. And I came across a box that had a few small bones in it. And so I had to go upstairs and say, Auntie, what is this? And that started the story. I inherited them and I have tried to get them buried, but because of various circumstances, and it's something it's time to check in again with, because I want to see how DNA detection has advanced. I wasn't able to hand it off to who I thought were the proper people. So so the journey continues really with the bones. Partly because after the performances, people would come up to me and say, is there more? Is there more? And they would say, oh, I could see this as a movie or a series or something like that, which was a huge compliment. And when I had been recording my aunt over a span of about 10 years, on dusty tapes and things like that, just trying to get what I could, there were so many good stories, especially the romantic stories, but I had to put them to the side. And so just to make myself feel better, I put them in a file called Save for the Book. And then when a theater called Book and Repertory Theater said, hey, would you do this play? We know that it's not a book yet because their whole mandate for 30 years was you take a book, you make it into a play. So instead of page to stage, I had the pressure to take it from stage to page. So I thought, well, between these two things, I kind of feel like I have no choice. And I needed that. I really needed that because I was kind of waiting to see, hey, is anybody else going to be telling these stories that I've collected? Who am I to do it? But I guess I'm the person. There's this feeling of grace when I was in her presence, and plenty of self-deprecation too. But it was a feeling that I wanted to share with people. She worked with everybody from, professional sports stars to people in prisons to people on reservations to, just all kinds of professionals. And you walk into a room with her and you just felt acceptance for wherever you were at, whoever you were, and however you came to be that way. And that's something that people after the play said that they felt, and it's a way to keep her living within other people, the ripples of her presence continuing out into the world. That's why it took 10 years, my friend, because I would visit with her. Like I'd fly out to Shaker Heights or to Laurel, Maryland, where she was living over the course of that. And, in one visit, she might mention that she had an encounter with Lyndon B. Johnson. And the next one, she might mention how she was training people to do sit-ins at the counters with Martin Luther King. Or she might mention how she was student body president at Howard and was Eleanor Roosevelt's escort. It took, like, in this day where everybody's shouting about everything they're doing, the second they do it, it was the opposite. It took 10 years to get these things that people would just blah, 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 as soon as you know them nowadays, So, yeah, and God, she was invited to Obama's inauguration, and she didn't go because she's pretty elderly. It was cold. And I talked to my cousins, and this was after she passed. I said, do you have the invitation? And they said, she probably used it as a bookmark. Really started with my grandfather, who was born around 1890. And he established the first hospital clinic in the area in Brazos County. It was the only place that was serving Black folks at the time in that area. And he had my Aunt Bebe growing up in that hospital. I have a picture of her in this little starch nurse's uniform. She couldn't be more than 8. So she was there all the time. She was a junior veterinarian. So she was going around as a teenage veterinarian, which is, I think, a book series unto itself. And then, she, in the book in particular, I highlight her reluctance to become a doctor and take on the mantle of everything that he had created. But she did, because of a joke that backfired. That's in the book. And she went on to be the first Black woman to head various clinics and just, just the OBGYN part, when you think about mortality among Black mothers now, is egregious. Think about what it was back then. So in that way, she made a difference. In terms of psychiatry, she made a difference. Just her very presence, being able to see her, just the presence being the work. And then there were ways that she did that accidentally. So in her years after the book takes place, so this is, a mix of, hence the genre, historical fiction. So one thing that happened in real life in the 50s, she moved to Connecticut with my uncle and her children. And she heard about this psychiatric institute. And she thought, well, maybe I'll volunteer over there. And she found out that there were people being put in there, kids in particular. It was a juvenile institution for miscegenation, like being caught making out in the back of a car, right? And then being thrown in an insane asylum, essentially. So she's like, you know what, maybe I better stick around. And she would do things like organize dances and do a lot of what's probably currently called as recreational therapy, things like that. And they got word of her over at Yale, and then she ended up studying at Yale and writing a paper on the psychiatric effects of racism with the head of the Yale psychiatric department at that time. I'm forgetting his name right now, but yeah, she just kind of landed into these situations in a way, but she landed into these situations because she was heart first, and that was backed up by courage, and she just did what she needed to do in the moment. A couple of things. One of them being recognizing the parallels in the rise of hate groups then and now, and the role that fake news had then and now in separating us from each other, making us come from a place of scarcity, of holding on to monoliths of who we think we are, things like that. Comes down to money, doesn't it? When you are aware of algorithms working contrary to what people are saying that they want to see, when you are aware that those algorithms are promoting hate and that there is money attached to that hatred, you don't care because you're in a privileged position. It doesn't affect you, right? If you are the one who's reaping the benefits, it's just stuff that's happening in the world that is benefiting you financially. And if it gets attention, it gets money. Myanmar is the first thing that comes to mind, when that whistleblower at Facebook blew all of that open. I'm forgetting her name right now, but she just had a book that came out. But just and not having third party checks and balances to see how factual information is or isn't, Yeah, it's just money. I hate to say it, but I think that's what it is. Money and power, too, because when people are feeling like they are losing something, again, coming from a place of scarcity, then they're going to be holding on to what they perceive as theirs that much more strongly. That's my opinion anyway. Don't know. And that was part of the pain of writing the book when I started writing, because there were things that she had said, and I wanted to follow up with her about that, but I couldn't. And all I know is that she said on more than one occasion that there were people on campus who were, so this is Howard University, an educated a world, who were saying, I don't know about that. And I don't know what kind of propaganda there was at the time. And that's surprising too, because it was the Black newspapers that were telling more truths seemingly than the white newspapers, and people like Einstein, he loved going to HBCUs partly because he could see the parallels too between Jim Crow and the rise in Nazism, and he spoke about that at various campuses. I know Lincoln was one of them, because Howard is Howard. I just kind of assumed that he went there. So I wish I knew. Relates to what I said before about who am I to tell this story? I'm a recessive gene wonder. My brother came out melanated. I did not. and I'm writing a little bit about that recently, because it seems to be that there dynamic tension between sympathy and empathy, right? If you the difference between what August Wilson wrote about too, about how you're treated in the world. But to your question, that is something I can write about, and something that I feel I can absolutely empathize with also are the Jewish people at the time who were deciding to pass. So there's a character in the book who definitely has that part of the story. But in my family, just hearing stories about Aunt Ella, who was completely passing like me. So if there ever is a movie, I'm kind of interested in playing that role, and the effect that had on the family, and yet it was accepted, and just all of the things that as Black folks one had to negotiate to hold on to what power one had, and that included embracing what the colonizer has told us to do. But when I heard about my great Aunt Prudence teaching etiquette classes to young Black women in Bryan, there was just such a mixed, no pun intended, feeling around that. But I mean, all of that colorism, all of it, everything on either side of the brown bag, it just affects marriages, for example, right? And the whole lightening of the line concept. After, one of the great things about Juneteenth was after that, people could get married, and it gives you something to hold on to for generations, especially after hundreds of years got ripped away, right? And so you have this wonderful thing, but people are calculating it so that people can end up looking like me. And so the power dynamics, all of the fine lines of those power dynamics, the worries and the concerns, just so much energy poured into that, and attention poured into that, and thinking about where that comes from and why would somebody take that on. That interests me. Why would somebody not reject that if you have the power to reject that, especially if you are lighter skinned? It's just a shame that got incorporated, and it's still alive and well today. So it's worth pointing out. It's been written about for years. Zora Neale Hurston wrote a lot about it too. I'm not saying I wrote a lot about it too, and I'm not comparing myself to Zora Neale Hurston, but it's important, and we have to recognize that it keeps coming up, and that it's not healthy. The first thing is I hope there are plenty of places in the book that make readers laugh out loud. I want that. There are many sobering moments, but I hope there are also things that make people laugh. I think a lot of it has to do with travel, the effects of travel, how it makes you see other people differently. You might make assumptions about other people when you're traveling and then find out that you're not quite right. There's that uncomfortable place of being looked at with new eyes. There's sometimes pleasant surprises in that as well. Like a lot of Blacks had in Paris right after both World War I and World War II, right? And that's why so many people stayed. It's a way of seeing your own country from a different light, both through somebody else's eyes and your eyes, and it's a way of seeing the world. And I think having these healthy fractures in the worldview that someone's created opens up more possibilities for creative problem solving, new tactics, healthy perspective. I'd like to say thank you for watching Black News Now. Returning the Bones can be found on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. The audiobook will be out in about a month or so. And on social media, on Instagram, I'm at Returning the Bones, and Facebook, Returning the Bones. I'm anti-Twitter now. And thank you. It was a real pleasure.